I have Rebecca Croll, the Director of Content of Forward 50 and Startup Fest from Canada, and Lauma Sile, the Chief Operating Officer of TechChill, joining us today. Please welcome them on stage. Hi, how are you?
Good morning from Montreal.
Good morning, Rebecca. Hi, Lauma, how are you doing?
Hi, great. Greetings from Riga.
Amazing. So thank you for being with us today. Alejandra from Startup Valencia couldn't join us. She's actually sick. So really sending you a lot of good vibes. Get well soon. So we have both of you to talk about online events 101. Basically, the idea is really to give a series of hints and like pitfalls to avoid, learnings that you got over the past year and a half. Can you just maybe quickly introduce yourselves in like a short sentence? What are your events about? Maybe Rebecca, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, we have two sort of flagship events. The first is Startup Fest, which is run out of Montreal, Canada's original startup event. It's really a gigantic party in Montreal in the summer, and you cannot beat Montreal in the summertime. And that's specifically for early stage startups. And then Forward 50, which is the world's leading digital government event, which talks about how to use technology to make society better for everybody.
Thank you. Lauma, your turn.
So here in Riga, we have TechChill, that is one of the leading technology startup events in Baltics. We cover the whole region. And our flagship event is happening every year usually in February. And we do also smaller events and warm-up events around a year to build the community and support all the stakeholders of the ecosystem.
I'm going to ask both of you the same question I asked Kai just earlier. What did you learn, what did you wish you would have known a year and a half ago? Who want to go first? Rebecca?
Sure. I think the biggest thing we've learned is how creative you need to be to maintain an audience and a community, because now online, we're one click away from Netflix. All they got to do is move over. So we're competing with Netflix or the equivalent. So how do you create a real event that allows for serendipity, that feels human and more than just a bunch of talking heads? And yeah, how do you keep that interest alive when really someone could go do the dishes? So that's I think the thing that I learned is just how creative you have to continuously be. You have to reinvent yourself constantly, surprise people, and make sure you're feeling real and not just live or things like that. Because we can now pre-record stuff. There's things that make our lives a lot easier, but you want to make sure you're finding that balance of maintaining that engagement throughout your events.
I'm sure we're going to talk more about that engagement part. I'm really curious to know more about your experience in that space. And you, Lauma, what would you have liked to know a year and a half ago?
I think so many things. Would definitely agree with Rebecca that about the creativity. One thing for us, it's definitely that you should not put the same KPIs or same objectives or same values as for in-person event. I wish we would have known that earlier, because it's connected to how you and what you communicate to partners, to attendees, to really everyone. And if you compare it to a physical event, you just don't see maybe how great your online event has been, because you're just putting the misleading KPIs, maybe let's say it like that.
It's a perfect transition to my next question. I wanted to ask you how you measure the success of an online event. What are those KPIs?
If I can continue on this.
Yeah, please.
I think that, we each can define what is success for our events. For one, it may be how many meetings that you had, for other, what kind of speakers you had, both in digital and in-person event. I think for us, the main thing was that we wanted to keep the community together, because we understood very, very quickly that this will not be the year when we break the records of attendees or speakers or sales or whatever else. Our main priority was to keep the community together, and based on the events that we had, like community gathering, an investor day, and also just a small little team meetups once that was allowed. It really made us feel that the event was a success. Because also all the people that we met online, the speakers, the investors, everything that we didn't know before, now we see them in events and they feel like extended family. And for us, that's a success.
Yeah, this is a hard one to measure, right? Rebecca, how do you measure the success of online events?
It's definitely difficult to quantify. We did with Startup Fest in the summer of 2020, we actually ran a hybrid event. So we had a small in-person, socially distant, outdoor live studio audience. And we would have folks phone in, much like you're on stage now, except we'd have a live studio audience. And then we'd bring in sort of past speakers and things to keep that community alive. Because like Lauma was saying, we weren't expecting it to like blow all sorts of records. We couldn't have our usual party. And it was really fun. It was great. It was like a family reunion in that sense. But with Forward 50, we found that it actually really benefited our audience because one, we no longer had the barriers of travel. So the event itself was much more accessible because we are an international event. So all of a sudden we could attract folks from around the world that couldn't have joined us in the past. And what was really nice is right off the bat, we said, look, this is a really strange year for everybody. Back in 2020, it was only a year. We're now going on 2. But we said, this is a really, really weird year. Things are going to go wrong. We don't know what's going to happen. We're going to do our best. And we had folks sort of putting their autoresponders on, which is also a great way for, extra marketing for your event because they're saying, hey, I'm at Forward 50. We had them screenshotting of how they were casting the content to their TVs at home and things like that, and really engaging that sort of vibrant chat. And our sponsors actually really loved the experience as well. We don't have a virtual demo booth, and like your previous speaker, I really just don't like that sort of bringing the real world into the virtual world for demo booths. But we don't do that with sponsors at Forward 50. The only way to get involved is really in our content. And they found a lot more engagement online, a lot more ability to capture those leads and things like that than they were in person. So there was a lot of more success on our sponsor front, but on our speaker front, because you're no longer saying, hey, spend 3 days, travel to in this case Ottawa, speak, land, leave. It's not a 3-day ask anymore. The caliber of speakers you can now attract is that much higher because all they have to do is hop on a Zoom call. And getting someone to say, yes, I'll give you an hour of my time is much easier now. So the caliber of speakers we were able to attract definitely went up, which was a huge success considering I direct content. That's really, that made me very happy.
I saw that here, the Pirate Life people managed to get Jason Fried. As you said, a speaker very hard to get, probably wouldn't have flown to Con, maybe, I don't know, but he went ahead and gave away a bit of his time. I want to follow up on one of the topics that you mentioned. You've been using already the word community, and we didn't discuss it too much earlier with Kai, but he kind of talked a bit about it. Like, what is your take on this entire idea that event organizers now have to be community builders? How do you do it? Are you doing it? And some of your learnings, again, over the past few months and year and a half. Now you can go, Lauma, if you want, because you mentioned this, that it was something very important for you in terms of key performance indicator. Like, are you sustaining your community? That's something that is part of your mission.
Yes, I think that, it depends on what kind of event you usually do. So does that connect to you being a community builder? For us, we are one of the main organizations here in Latvia regarding to startups. So we have taken this role within our community like that. And I think that's definitely not for every event. That's something that organizers can take up. But I think that now when we see even in-person events happening, we are the events where everyone comes together. So if we're not hosting something, where would they meet up?
And you, Rebecca, this Startup Fest vibe is also an element that kind of is part of your work now, to be actively engaging in nurturing, creating, growing a community?
100%. And I mean, the Startup Fest community has been around for over a decade. The Forward 50 community, we're heading to our 5th year, and it's actually a conversation that we're having internally right now is, what do we do for our community? We're looking at building a community platform, going out and talking to our community and saying, what is useful to you? Is this something that you even want? How can we build something that you will engage with? Because there's nothing worse than like, we're going to build a community and then it's crickets. You don't want that. That's no fun for anyone. So what does your specific community want from you? How can you help it? What are the resources you can offer? What are the experts you can bring in? And I think sort of that's the conversation internally that we're having right now is what should that community platform look like? Because we know we have a super engaged community. We've been, bringing them content throughout the year during COVID, whereas before it was November, woohoo, Forward 50, and then, we sort of disappear and send some newsletters. So the last couple of years have really been how do we engage year round? And now we're like, okay, we have this wonderful community. What do we do to maintain it? And what do they want from us that would be of value to them?
And you're mentioning the tool that you need for this community platform. And one of the things that you have to be, you probably were already before, but as event producers, organizers, you also need to be kind of well-versed into technology. Like you need to be a technologist yourself. You basically have to know the different platforms, the different tools. I don't know if both of you were already as techy as you are now after 2 years into, a year and a half into this online event space. Can you tell us more about, how it was for you to run online events from the technology side of things? What are the tools that you ended up using? You can give names. I'm really curious to know how it was to become, a geek event producer. You want to go first, Rebecca?
Sure. I was not a technologist at all. It sort of crept up on me. My background is actually as an actor, and that's why I sort of gravitated towards content. Is I've got that sort of show must go on mentality, and I love the stage and the pressure and the music and the headsets and the clipboard. I love all that stuff. And then COVID, so we had to learn everything about online platforms. We have a spreadsheet with about 250 different suppliers, and we went through it. We tested a lot of things, spoke to a lot of CEOs of some great companies. We narrowed down a few sort of favorites as we went through the pandemic. We've run shows on both Hopin and Grip. StreamYard is my favorite thing in the whole wide world. If you don't know it, it's fantastic. Take a look. Also super reasonable and budget friendly. And then internally, obviously, our team is working on things like Slack and Rike and all things Google. But yeah, StreamYard, Grip, Hopin, those tend to be our favorites. And then the thing that the nut that we're still trying to crack is what is the best way to make a lot of these platforms accessible. Accessibility is still not a front of mind consideration for a lot of online platforms. And particularly, like it's something that's obviously really important to us. So how do we integrate different tools to make our platforms as accessible as possible?
Super interesting. TechChill, how do you do it?
There were so many tools and platforms. I can agree with Rebecca that before, I think we had like one tech person or like one team or like some people that knew what was going on, and all the other people just did their tasks. And I was definitely not one of the tech people. But once you're hosting a digital event, you have to know everything, because if you're working with partners, you have to explain how they will get to their booth, how they will put all the information in, what will be the functions. You have to sell it, so you have to know the product. Therefore, all of our team had to know everything about what tools are we using and how are we using them. And to run the event, we used a platform called PineTool, and it was quite a risk because they were developing the platform when we jumped in. So throughout the season, they were still checking the bugs, checking what are going on, putting up updates. We crashed on our launch event. All the platform went just on pause, and we had to transfer to Facebook Live. So we were testing out it big time. But on top of that, we used also StreamYard and Zoom as if we needed some integrations. And then for side events, we used many different platforms to keep the networking more alive. One platform that worked really well for us for Investor Day and also community event was GatherTown, which is kind of like gamification. You have these avatars and you go around the room and there's bars and you can go up to people and you can go up to the stage. So that was something that surprisingly worked really, really well. But we used a lot of other kind of like that tools. So we weren't afraid to just choose one and stick with that. We really altered what kind of networking aspects we need for specific events.
Yeah, if I can just chime in on the spatial networking one, because I forgot to mention those, and they're great. We used a couple, one called Kumo Space and one called Wonder.me. Both had a lot of success with those. Kumo Space sounds like it's very similar to GatherTown.
Yeah.
Your little videos wandering around. It's got a max of like 25 people. It's great for sort of a lobby. And yeah, those were fantastic options for spatial networking.
Love it. We're becoming geeks, without even wanting. I'm checking the questions from the audience. Please go ahead, leave a question if you want to know more about running online events, or you have run some. I see a comment from Jan, and I feel like I know who is that Jan. I'm going to, share with you. We measured the post-event survey asking a few questions like, how happy were you? Do you think you will get some deals? How many meaningful connections did you make? And those gave at least some indication of success. Do you ask your attendees if they are happy?
I don't know if they specifically ask if they're happy, but we certainly do post-event surveys. And for Forward 50, because that was the one where, Forward 50 was a juggernaut. It was 6 days, 5 simultaneous tracks, over 250 speakers. It was a lot, and the response we get was overwhelmingly positive. And so that was very promising for us. We had a hypothesis that folks would show up for the keynotes in the morning, they would maybe snack on the content that was relevant to them, but that there would be a big drop off in the afternoon. And it's not what we saw. We saw sort of throughout the event, there was no drop off. People stuck around in the afternoons, the numbers stayed strong. And so that was really exciting for us. And so we could see that folks were engaged in responding to what we were offering. And then the surveys were obviously very positive in that sense too.
We also did surveys after the event, but for us, for the digital format, we got way less responses as we usually do if we do the same survey for physical events. So we didn't get that much feedback, but we did talk to both partners and some community people just to get their full raw opinion, and the opinions really differed. But overall, we're positive feedbacks because they evaluated it as a digital event, not an event in general.
I have another question. What has been your experience with monetizing events in terms of ticketing? This is a tough question. Did you monetize your event with ticketing, sponsors? How was it? Lauma, if you want to continue, or...
Sure. Yes. So we did do tickets, and we also had partners. Regarding tickets, there were significantly different numbers than we have for an in-person event. That's I think for many event organizers, and we still are planning to do digital tickets for our hopefully in-person event for next year. But yes, we did see that people are not really that motivated to purchase a ticket online, because there are a lot of events that are giving out free tickets, and you're also competing to, as we mentioned before, Netflix or YouTube or any other entertainment or even work themes or anything like that. So it's really hard to compete with that. But we did work with partners, with sponsors, and at first we were quite worried if partners will want to support a digital event, because the ROI could be very, very different, as we know. But after first few talks or first partners that said no, we kind of changed up our strategy and saw which companies are interested in the digital formats. For example, if a small startup has a digital product, they have mentioned to us that we don't really need a booth at the event because we can't show it as we want it. But at a digital event, it's really beneficial for them. And it's the same for bigger companies. If they find a way how to really fully show their product or interact with the audience, then they don't really care if it's it's digital or not, and if it's a long-term partner, then they will stick around.
And how was it in Montreal?
I'll speak specifically to Forward 50 because that's the one that we ran as sort of a fully virtual event.
Fully virtual, yeah.
And we found, well, for us, we're a bit of a unique situation in that we are a training event, like we are deemed a training event for government in Canada, for federal government, which means it's part of their job to show up and learn. So that's super helpful. Like it helps in terms of knowing that your audience will be there. And the thing that's tough, and depending on the communities, and with Startup Fest, we work with early stage startups. They don't have money to spend on online tickets, right? So we'll do events for free, and obviously in the case of Startup Fest, we have government support. We have some amazing partners that have supported us throughout the years and and throughout COVID. With Forward 50, we do charge for tickets. Obviously, they're not as expensive as in-person tickets because we don't have to build an entire infrastructure, but we do charge for tickets. And we also have some amazing partners that have stuck with us. And in fact, this year, we're seeing more partners get involved than before. So the partners aren't shying away from what we're offering, which is great. They continue to be engaged. They continue to support the event at really remarkable levels and have been incredibly supportive since the get-go of COVID and sort of trust that we're going to bring value to them. But it is difficult when you're competing with folks that are not monetizing their events in terms of ticket sales, because there's sort of you're devaluing the content that you're providing to your audience. And I get it, in some cases their communities just don't have money to spend, and you know they're not going to spend the money, but you want to offer something to your community. But it's very difficult to compete if there are events out there that are offering similar content, but for free. It's very hard to sort of stay afloat in that sense, because you're competing with them, and everyone's going to choose free if they can. If all things are created equal and one ticket's free, you're obviously going to choose the free ticket, right?
No, of course. I'm seeing a question from the audience that I also wanted to ask about engagement and organic engagement. My question was like, what have you experienced so far that worked well, and what didn't? But Rebecca, with Forward 50 maybe?
Sure. So one thing that we're a very small team that sort of run these events, and something that we find works really well for us is that personal touch. We don't sort of automate things. You're always dealing with a human. We send personalized emails. We build those relationships. And one thing that we found worked really well, and I'm going to put my content hat on, is we went from a world where you expect a speaker, for instance, to show up, maybe have showered that morning and put on a nice jacket, know their content, and that's about it. They just have to get on stage, you hand them a clicker, they know their slides, and they're off. You're now relying on speakers to be the lighting, to be the sound, to be the bandwidth, to be able to have some understanding of technology where they can coherently share their slides and speak at the same time. So all of a sudden, there's a huge shift in what we're expecting from the people that are bringing content to our events. And what we found worked really, really well was creating a process where we're hand-holding them through that. So we did speaker trainings. We spent 90 minutes inviting all of our speakers to do speaker trainings, and not just about how to do a better online presentation for our event, but to teach them in general how to be better speakers for online events, how to shake it up, how to, ask questions of the audience. There's different tricks and tools you can use as you're speaking that we wanted to impart to our audience, because obviously it's going to benefit our production if they're better speakers. And better prepared. Sort of, here, this is a list of some of the tools you might need. Here's your headsets, here's your mics, here's different budgeting elements. If you've got a little less budget, these tools work great. Run your internet speed test to make sure that your bandwidth is going to work, and you're not sort of like that in the middle of a sentence, right? So for us, the speaker training and hand-holding worked really, really well. And we obviously had to develop that process. We didn't have it beforehand. So figuring out what our speakers needed and how we could make sure that happened was huge for us and paid off really, really well. And
you were mentioning at TechChill a few of the experiments that you were running with different tools, software to create that engagement with participants. Do you have any plans for doing this with hybrid? Like, that's actually the question from the audience. How would you make it for online participants to engage during a hybrid event, right? Where you have people at the venue. Do you have any plans already for TechChill 2022?
That's a question that we're tackling right now, actually. But for TechChill 2022, we need to have some digital element because the demands have changed, the lifestyles and everything like that. But currently for us, we plan to do as much in person as we can and keep the networking and everything like that, and only provide content digitally. So we will stream everything like that. We might organize some events that will be like networking events only for digital participants, but we're still, this is a question still for us, how to engage both people that are attending in person and that are attending digitally. Because if you are in a conference in person and you need a space to have a video call or something like that, that's connected to a lot of aspects. Is there some kind of a booth or a quiet corner in your venue? Is there not that much in the agenda for example, if it's an investor or something like that? So currently we do hope to make as much as we can in person and not go that far into the hybrid model, just have some elements of digital. That's currently the game plan for us, but we'll see if the situation here in Latvia and in Europe in general changes, then we might go further into hybrid and see what other event organizers are doing.
It's actually a question that I see coming up again and again here on Slido. Like people are asking, how are you going to do that? How about the mix of live and online participants? How does the online community not feel left out? What to focus on? And this is like coming, again and again. People are really curious to see what is the game plan for those hybrid events. I have one more question I would like to ask for those founders in the room who want to be speaker at an event, at your event maybe. Do you have some tips to give to them? Like I also think about the fact, as Rebecca was telling us, that an online presenter, a good speaker might not be a good online presenter, as you were saying. What would you tell a founder in this room to focus on to be a speaker at your event maybe, or become a better speaker, and what it is why it is something that could be interesting for them? That would be probably my last question for our panel.
I can chime in.
Yes, please.
So I think a lot of events do a call for proposals, right? The number one thing you can do is your research. I was actually asked to speak about how to get selected to speak a while back, pre-COVID. And the number one thing I can say is do your research and be specific, because I literally received a proposal once that said, I can speak about anything. That is completely unhelpful to me. I have, if I want to be able to see, everyone who runs content wants to have their agenda full, their lineup full, to be able to move on to the next thing. So make my life as easy as possible by saying, here's what I can teach. Here's what your audience will learn very specifically. Here are the takeaways they will get. Here is my rig in terms of my bandwidth is good. I have this setup. I have this microphone. So I know at least that you're thinking about it, but get very, very specific about what you can teach my community, and make sure you've looked at past agendas, past speakers, so you know the themes and the conversations that we're going to try and have. For Forward 50 specifically, we survey our community every year to find out what's front of mind. And this is a government audience that we're talking to. So what can you teach them? Give me the high level, give me your talk title, your talk description. And if you can sneak into my inbox, if you can find a way to connect with me on LinkedIn and make that personal connection, rather than just being some, invisible person that I've never met, I don't know anything about on a form, it's a good trick, because at least speaking specifically for our events, those even if you email the info it'll land in my inbox, and then we'll start a dialogue, and then I'll learn about it. We'll probably get on a call. I'll learn more about you. And then once I have that sort of personality in my head and that person that I can attach to that subject, I'll be keeping you in mind as I'm going through my agenda and filling that out. So do your research, be really specific in your proposal. Make sure, even nowadays, it's super easy to record yourself speaking. So if you can send me a link to previous works you've done, or if you haven't done anything, just put yourself on tape and, use something like StreamYard to record yourself speaking, so I see how you teach an audience. Those would be my tips.
It's very good. I don't know, Lauma, you have anything else to add to these tips for a founder in the room who would like to join and speak at TechChill?
I definitely agree to Rebecca. There were so many emails that I received that I can speak about everything, or even full-on presentations about, I can speak anything about motivation and leadership and things like that. And that's really not what you're looking at when everything is burning and you're looking for like how to have a unique talk. I would say that to add up, find something that you are really passionate about and that you think you're really special in, because if we will want a speaker of one of the top companies or some big names or something like that, we will target them separately. But most of the talks in events, I would say, is actually of founders or of just inspiring people who have really something special, or their journeys or what they're building or something like that. And that's the main selling point. If you can be very specific and really show your compassion in the topic, then you are very likely to be picked. We have several cases on our open call. For example, we had a speaker about growth hacking that just sent in very specific pitch that I think he even sent in like a video or something like that. And that was one of my favorite talks at the conference because of how much he loved the topic. And still up to this day, he's a huge supporter of our event. And I just think that if you are passionate and if you are specific, you have a high probability of being a speaker at the event.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us today. This is the end of this introduction session, Online Events 101. Great to have you both with us, and thank you for sharing the stage and your learnings. And I hope to see you very soon, either online or in person. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.